Hello, and thank you for joining me again on another of my little adventures. Now, I've always had a fascination with abandoned buildings, particularly ruined abbeys and churches. These places have not been just places of worship, but they've witnessed many historical dramas, and a lot of them have fascinating legends associated with them. So join me as I explore some of the beautiful and atmospheric ruined churches and abbeys of Lincolnshire and East Anglia. I'm in my home county of Lincolnshire. Hello there. And this is Tupholme Abbey. It was founded in the 12th century and it's just one of 6 monastic houses that lay along a 10-mile stretch of the east bank of the River Witham. And it's one of only a few medieval ruined abbeys still standing in the county. Now, like so many place names in Lincolnshire, the name Tupholme has Viking origins. Tup is a word for a male sheep, and home is Old Norse for island. So, island of the sheep. And many centuries later, it's still island of the sheep. So, if you come here, be careful where you're walking. Now, Tupholme Abbey belonged to the Premonstratensian order of monks. Now, I think that's how you pronounce it. And they wore white habits, so they were better known as the White Canons. Now, by all accounts, the monks here at Tupholme Abbey were a bit troublesome, and one was even suspected of forgery and counterfeiting. Now, of course, Tupholme Abbey was to close during the dissolution of the monasteries, but many centuries later it would have one last moment of fame. Now, it's hard to imagine, but back in 1972 this was a location for one of Britain's biggest rock concerts, and then, as now, it was absolutely tipping it down with rain. It was known as the Great Western Festival and was held on the late May bank holiday of that year, and some 50,000 people camped in these sheep fields to watch some of the biggest names in music at the time. The lineup included Status Quo, Joe Cocker, Rory Gallagher, and one of my all-time favourites, Slade. Also, the legendary Beach Boys. Although there wasn't much California sun to be had here, this is England after all. The site was battered by gale force winds and rain, and some of the festival goers were treated for hypothermia. One of the main organisers of the festival was the actor Stanley Baker, best known today for the film Zulu. However, despite good attendance, the event was a financial loss. No more festivals were held here, so the sheep were left in peace. Yes, it's a bit wet, isn't it? You got the right idea. The ghost here is said to take the form of a phantom white calf. Now, it's interesting to note that the canons of Tupholme Abbey wore white habits. Could there be some kind of connection between them and the white phantom calf? All I know is I'm getting very, very wet. I'm going, and I'll see you at the next location. These are the ruins of Monk's Abbey, situated on Monk's Road in the city of Lincoln. Founded in the 12th century as a cell of St Mary's Abbey in York, it belonged to the Benedictine order, and it was closed as part of the dissolution of the monasteries in 1539, and like many such buildings, it fell into ruin. At one time, the abbey stood beside a leafy lane, in open fields above the River Withern. Now it has been engulfed by the inner city and surrounded by streets and houses. The area around Monk's Abbey is known as the Willows, and this unlikely location has the following little-known folk tale attached to it. Long ago, there was once a beautiful lady who lived close to the banks of a swift-flowing river. According to local legend, the river was magical and had a deep pool where the River Withern met the River Till. The lady loved a handsome knight, and together they would meet in secret by the pool. Further downstream was an abbey surrounded by weeping willows, and there grew some of the loveliest flowers the lady had ever seen. One spring day, when the sun was shining and the birds were singing, the lady begged her sweetheart to fetch some of the beautiful blue flowers for her. So the knight dismounted from his horse, and as he stepped out into the pool, he soon realized how much mud lay beneath the water, and his armour grew heavy. He carried on, however, and made it to the island, where he picked her a bunch of the exquisite blue flowers. But returning was more difficult, and his armour grew heavier and heavier, and the weight began to pull him down. Realizing he was doomed, he held the flowers high and called out to her, "Forget-me-not!" And then he sank beneath the deep, dark water. It is said that even now, on certain spring days, you can hear the sound of the lady crying and the knight calling, and that is how the blue flower came to have its name. I am in the beautiful Lincolnshire Wolds, with its gentle rolling hills, hidden valleys, sleepy villages and sheep. There are also a number of small ancient ruined churches to be found here. One example are the ruins of St Andrew's in the small hamlet of Calceby. Now, I've been aware of this ruin for many years. My family live in this part of the Wolds, and St Andrews stands on a hill at the side of the ancient Bluestone Heath Road. There is an information board by the side of the road telling you about the church, which dates to the 11th century, but there is no public access to the ruins. It's hard to imagine what this church once looked like. Now, as I mentioned, it dates from the 11th century, and the last service to take place here was in 1692. So it's been abandoned for well over 300 years. There used to be a prominent arch here which collapsed in 2019. Now, I was here in the summer of 2018 when the arch was still magnificent, and unfortunately the loss of the arch has certainly diminished the ruin. Now, there are no interesting folk tales or legends associated with St Andrews, at least none that I know of. However, in the late 1950s, a local man retrieved a carved stone head from the ruins of Calceby Church, and it remained with his family until 2014, when the son-in-law of the man who was now long deceased gave the head to the City and County Museum in Lincoln. I think the head looks a little bit like the vampire in the classic 1922 movie Nosferatu. But then, I just love old horror movies. Sadly, with the arch now gone, I'm sure it won't be long before what's left of these ancient walls collapse. So, I've just come to see it one last time. These are the remains of All Saints' Church in Gillingham, South Norfolk. Built in the late 14th century, the parish church was demolished in 1748, and now only the imposing ivy-clad west tower remains. According to local legend, the churchyard is haunted by the ghost of a wicked parson who, for his sins, was transformed into a gigantic black dog with huge glowing eyes. The creature is also said to haunt a lane next to the church, appropriately known as Dog's Lane. This is the Priory of St Mary in the Meadow, also known as Beeston Priory, in the village of Beeston Regis, North Norfolk. The priory was founded by Marjorie de Crecy in 1216, and the canons here followed the rules of St Augustine, and they belonged to the Order of Peterstone, a small and mysterious Norfolk religious order of which very little is known. Near the Abbey ruins is the impressive Beeston Bump, a mound of sand and gravel standing 63 metres or 207 feet above sea level. Formed during the last ice age, it commands panoramic views of the area, and according to local legend, it is also one of the many layers of Black Shuck, the demonic hellhound that haunts the shores of East Anglia. It is also said that the priory ruins were haunted by a ghostly monk that appeared to a local farmer named Reynolds. The story goes that 2 stones stood either side of a path beside the priory gates. Farmer Reynolds would drive his cart along the path each night, where a hooded figure would jump out from behind the large stones. The ghost, dressed in grey robes, made an attempt to grab hold of the horse's reins before it disappeared, having terrified the poor animals. Farmer Reynolds insisted that on his death one of the 2 stones should become his grave marker. He hoped that by removing the ghost's hiding place he would lay the spirit to rest. After he died in 1941, and in accordance to his wishes, one of the large standing stones was indeed placed on top of his grave at All Saints Churchyard in Beeston Regis. The stone, a glacial erratic, still marks his final resting place, and the other stone is said to lie against the north wall of the churchyard. As for the ghost, well, presumably, with no hiding place, it no longer haunts Beeston Priory. This is Creake Abbey in North Norfolk. It was founded in the 13th century by the Augustinian order, and for a time the canons ran an almshouse for the poor and the needy. In 1225, Henry III elevated the priory to abbey status, and it benefited from many generous donations. However, disaster was just around the corner. In the year 1484, a terrible fire swept through the building, and so much of it had been destroyed that the canons planned to leave the abbey altogether. There were several attempts at rebuilding, but the abbey was never returned to its former glory. and having barely recovered from the disastrous fire, the plague struck the community and the final abbot died here alone in 1506. The abbey then became property of the crown. It's a very atmospheric ruin. It has flint walls. Now, Norfolk is famous for its flint churches. They have been mining flint here since the Neolithic times. There are no ghosts or legends associated with Creake Abbey, at least as far as I know. However, in 1991, a supernatural drama called Do Not Disturb was filmed here. It starred a youthful Peter Capaldi, who went on to become the 12th Doctor Who. I remember the drama was very atmospheric. I didn't understand it, but I think you can still watch it on YouTube. The various coins people have inserted here. Penny. That's interesting. I'm not sure what that is. I don't think it's a British coin. Well, if I collect enough of them, go and get myself a cup of tea at the shop. This is St Andrew's Church, a partially redundant Anglican church in the hamlet of Covehithe in Suffolk. There are two churches here. The largest and oldest is now a ruin and dates from the 14th and 15th century. Much of the damage to the old church was done during the English Civil War, not in battle, but by just one man, a Puritan called William Dowsing. He spent much of his time travelling across East Anglia, vandalising Catholic churches, and he destroyed much of the stained glass here at St Andrew's. When the Civil War ended, the local parishioners decided that it wasn't necessary for a small community to have such a large church. So in 1672, they had permission to remove the roof and they built a much smaller church here against the West Tower, which is still in use today. But if you visit these ruins at night, then you best be very wary, for it is said to be haunted by the ghost of a woman without a face, and she's most active after dark. Nobody knows who she was in life, but some say that the ghost has the task of protecting the church from falling into the sea, like so much of the surrounding coastline. Sadly, as one of the worst places for coastal erosion in Britain, it's estimated that the village and the church, and presumably the ghost, will be claimed by the sea within 50 years. Well, I'm back in Lincolnshire, and this is all that remains of Bardney Abbey. As you can see, there's very little left of the Abbey. Now, compared to East Anglia, there are very few picturesque ruins in Lincolnshire, possibly because of the lack of ready building materials here. So any abandoned buildings were quickly reused. Bardney Abbey was founded in the 7th century and it's one of the oldest in the country. It was destroyed during a Viking raid in 869 and later refounded as a priory, and it regained status as an abbey in 1115. The abbey was excavated between 1909 and 1914, but to preserve the stonework, the remains were covered over. In 2011, the abbey site was re-excavated and a number of interesting stone carvings were uncovered, which are now in Lincoln Museum. I must admit, I'm quite surprised by how little you can see of the ruins. I was last here about 20 years ago, and I'm sure parts of it were visible then. But it's July and the grass is quite long. Now, there is lots of history here, far too much for me to mention. But my favourite story is that of the relics of St Oswald. According to St Bede, one of the most notable scholars during the early Middle Ages, Osrith, Queen of Mercia, sought to have the bones of her uncle St Oswald, a former king of Northumbria, interned at the abbey. However, the monks had little regard for St Oswald on account that he had once invaded and conquered the kingdom of Lindsey, which included Bardney. They refused to accept the relics of St Oswald and bolted the doors of the abbey to prevent them being taken indoors. However, during the night, a great beam of light appeared and shone from the body, reaching up to the heavens. The monks declared this to be a miracle and accepted the body, hanging the king's purple and gold banner over the tomb. Like so many holy relics, the bones of St Oswald were said to have great healing powers, and it's also said that the monks removed the great doors of the abbey so that such a mistake could not occur again. Well, this is a good place to end my journey, and as usual, if you have made it this far, then thank you very much, and please join me next time.